Hello and welcome to OUTLORE Podcast. I'm Eleanor Neale, and in today's episode, we're in Cornwall in 2011, where a mother of two is about to be subjected to over 12 hours of horrific torture that nearly killed her. What started with her being bundled up in a duvet, unable to move and barely able to breathe, ended with her eyes literally hanging out of her head. Her attacker twisting the knife, letting her know that now, after what he had just done to her, she would never be able to see the faces of her children ever again. This is the truly haunting story of what happened to Tina Nash, not just on the night of the attack, but the gradual, increasing hell that she endured leading up to those final blows. Outlaw. At the age of 27, Tina Nash was swept off her feet by a man that she thought could be her soulmate. He adored her and showered her with affection. It truly was like movie love, until the movie switched up. Her partner's mask slipped, and Tina saw a side of pure evil in this man. Deceit, control, abuse, toxicity. He didn't love her. He told her that he did, but the fact of the matter was, he had coaxed her into a trap, and now that he had her, she wasn't safe. Everyone around her saw the truth of this horrific, abusive situation, but no matter how many times the police were called, no matter how many times her loved ones begged her to leave him, Tina felt trapped. And then, on a random Wednesday night, he inflicted his most violent and gruesome attack on the woman that he claimed to love, and her life would never be the same again. This one is going to be a tough one, guys. I'll be honest. I have to warn you of the sensitive topics that we're going to be covering today. The main one being graphic descriptions of severe physical violence and injury. But this whole case has themes of domestic abuse and violence throughout, so viewer discretion is advised. And before we get stuck into the case, I do want to take a moment to thank our sponsor for making this episode of Outlaw on YouTube possible. It's our good friends over at Casetify. They're back! We've missed you guys! The holiday season is just around the corner, meaning so is Casetify's biggest sale of the year. Maybe a new phone case doesn't immediately spring to mind for holiday gifting, but it's actually such a genius idea, if I do say so myself. That was my idea. Everyone has such unique interests and aesthetics. It's a lovely way to show someone how well you know them, and it's such a practical gift. My favourite kinds of gifts are the ones that tick both those boxes. And when it comes to accessorising my tech, Casetify has been my go-to for years. You guys know this. I recommend them to all my friends and family. In fact, I gift my mum a new Casetify phone case every Christmas without fail. But the matching set that I'm rocking this holiday season is this gorgeous plaid teddy bear pattern. It's adorable, super cozy vibes, and even though it is giving kind of festive right now, it's still gonna look really cute in the new year since it's not like overtly festive, you know what I mean? So I got a matching phone case and all of these cute accessories, a card holder, which is so good because when you're on a night out, your ID is just like right there. It's so convenient. I don't have to put as many things in my pockets or in my bag. And also this stand, which is perfect to prop up my phone while FaceTiming or watching YouTube or anything. Shopping at Casetify couldn't be easier. You order everything online, it's stress-free. I mean, I'll show you right now. I'll take you all shopping for my mum's annual phone case refresh. I think I'm gonna get her this one with the bows. She loves a bow, and I'll personalize it for her too as a little finishing touch. But don't worry if online shopping's not really your thing or you don't want to scroll through all their different collections. You can just check out my personal curated picks by clicking on my link. I made sure that there's hopefully something in there for everyone. So to shop the best deals this holiday season from Casetify, scan the QR code on screen or you can use my promo link. It's down below in the description, casetify.com/Eleanor, to customize your phone cases for 15% off. And if you spend $90 or more, you can get an even bigger discount. Just make sure to order by the cutoff date, which is soon, December 9th. The link will also be in the description. Did I say that? I definitely just said that, but it will be, so use it. Thank you again to Casetify for sponsoring this episode and making it possible. Now it's time to talk about truly one of the most brave and inspiring women we have ever covered. Tina Nash was born in Cornwall, southwest England in 1980. She was raised there and she lived there her whole life. And Cornwall truly is one of the most beautiful parts of this whole entire country. It's a seaside county that hardly even looks British. It looks like a tropical destination, especially in the middle of summer. Cornwall is so beautiful. Tina grew up there with all of her siblings. It was quite a big family. Tina was one of 6 children, and because the family was so big, their grandmother was very, very involved in their upbringing. And from what I can tell, Tina had a really nice childhood, a really nice home life, and a family life. Then, when she was just 16 years old, Tina found out that she was pregnant. I can only imagine the range of emotions that must come with finding that out at such a young age. But one thing was sure with Tina. She knew that she wanted to keep this baby. And so 9 months later, Tina is the mother of a beautiful baby boy. The father of this baby was Tina's boyfriend at the time, but as with most high school relationships, they didn't stay together very long, and Tina soon found herself a single teen mum. But she had all the support in the world from her family. This baby boy was going to grow up with 5 doting aunties and uncles alongside grandma, great-grandma, and of course, Tina herself turned out to be a fabulous mother. After the birth of her son, life went on for a little while without much of note taking place. Tina was trying hard to strike the balance in her late teens and early 20s between being the best, most hands-on mother that she could be, but also while still enjoying her youth, still going out and joining in with what everyone else her age was doing, essentially going to the club. And it was on one of these nights out that she would be introduced to a mutual friend, a man named Shane Jenkins, who clearly had a thing for Tina. He made her very aware that he wanted to be more than friends. And Tina might have felt the same way had it not been for one of their mutual friends warning her off him. Shane was just a bit of a wrong'un, more than a bit of a wrong'un actually. He had just gotten out of prison at the time that Tina met him. He had served 4 years behind bars already, and he's only 22 years old, served 4 years behind bars for committing such a serious physical assault that he had left his victim with brain damage. So yeah, no shit, Tina wasn't interested in this man. She was just 19 when she met him, with a 2 or 3 year old kid at home. Of course, she wasn't willing to put herself or her son in any sort of close proximity with this man. Like I said, Shane was a few years older than Tina. He was 22 when they met, and he was the kind of man who would not take no for an answer. He thought that Tina was just playing hard to get with him, and maybe if he just kept chasing and pounced on her, then maybe he would win her. Consent and boundaries are clearly foreign concepts to this man. If his 4 years in prison stint wasn't horrifying enough, the red flags were glaring in so many different ways. But he proceeded to love bomb Tina Nash, begging her for a chance, turning up at her house without warning. It got to the point where she had to just ignore him as he was banging on her door. She had to go quiet and essentially hide in her own home in complete silence, just to pretend that she wasn't in. Eventually, Shane would get the hint and he would leave, and over time, as he realised that trying to wear her down like this wasn't working, Shane mostly gave up. Tina later went on to meet a different man who she entered into a long-term relationship with, and she actually had another son with him. But their little family unit would eventually break apart, and Tina found herself single again in her mid-20s. And it was then, at the age of 27, that she would run into Shane Jenkins once again, the man who never truly gave up the chase. He was still, after almost a decade, determined to make Tina Nash his. But this time around, she was actually more open to the possibility of something happening between them, and that could be down to a number of possible reasons. At this time in her life, Tina was vulnerable. She was trying to raise her children on her own after 2 failed relationships. She wanted something to work out. She wanted a man, someone to come and sweep her off her feet and give her stability. And maybe there was another element to it of her thinking that he had genuinely grown and changed and become a better man within that decade of knowing him. Because at first, it did actually seem like he had changed. In fact, he was quite successful in winning her over. He treated her really nicely. He paid for absolutely everything in the beginning. He ticked all of her boxes. And this time around, Tina didn't feel overwhelmed or scared by him. In her words, he felt more caring and protective. But I'll be honest, the use of the word protective, it sounds like there might have already been an element of control in there, disguised as being well-intentioned. Like, oh, I'm just trying to protect you, do what I say, kind of thing. I'm not sure though. But once Shane Jenkins had successfully locked down Tina Nash as his girlfriend, he switched on her, and he quickly became the boyfriend from hell. The two of them had only been together for a few months when Shane's mask began to slip. Usually, when he'd had a lot to drink, he would become aggressive with Tina. He would call her awful names, insult her, say some really cutting, mean things. And then the next day, it would just have to be okay. Tina would just have to forgive and forget. The physical aggression began sneaking in at first through like throwing and hitting things around the house, and then it became specifically targeted at Tina's own possessions. He would break her shit, he would smash her stuff up. Even when he wasn't specifically like drunk and aggressive, he was just starting to become really smothering in general. He was always wherever she was, he was just always there. He was suddenly a lot to deal with. And then by New Year's Eve, 2009 into 2010, they had been together for 6 months. And when they went out to celebrate with their mates, Shane obviously got really, really drunk and once again switched up on Tina out of nowhere. She found him outside of the club talking to one of the bouncers. And when she got his attention, he turned to her and just started screaming at her, insulting her, calling her a slag. And then he spat at her. Mind you, she had just been inside dancing. She hadn't done anything or provoked anything. She had been minding her business up until he caught her eye, and then all of a sudden, he's really mad at her. After that, everyone decided that it was for the best if they all just call it a night and go home. But as Tina and Shane and 2 of their other friends piled into the same car, the abuse continued. He began pulling her hair as he yelled and intimidated and insulted her. And then when they got out of the car at home, Shane shoved Tina to the ground. These friends, having laid witness to all of this abuse, not only verbal, but several instances of physical abuse, all in the last fucking 20 minutes, they knew that they couldn't leave Tina alone with Shane. This had to stop here. So they took her inside and they stayed with her while she packed up some bags, and then they drove her to stay with another friend for a while because this was possibly the worst that they had ever seen Shane Jenkins get with Tina. It was really scary. The next morning, Shane wakes up probably with a vicious hangover and without his girlfriend, Tina, and he decides that he's going to get her back. Totally disregarding the actual reason that she left him, but he just starts love bombing her and coaxing her back. And her friends and family could see that it was working on her. And they tried everything that they possibly could to talk Tina out of getting back with him. They could see this situation for what it really was. It was abusive and it was progressively getting worse over time. But Tina was totally brainwashed by this manipulative verbal abuse. There had been months and months and months of him eroding her self-esteem and making her feel trapped and tied to him, like she couldn't possibly live without him. Tina Nash was a victim of coercive control. We talked about coercive control in our episode on the Bubble and Squeak murder, where an older woman named Penny Jackson just snapped one night and killed her husband after decades of alleged abuse. Penny's case is an example of how being a victim of coercive control, especially over such prolonged periods of time, it can really, really F someone up mentally. Coercive control is a pattern of controlling, manipulative, and dominating behaviour that one person uses to gain power over another, usually in intimate or family relationships. It often involves psychological, emotional, and even social abuse designed to isolate, intimidate, and oppress the victim over time. And this is a relatively newish concept. People are just starting to become familiar with the term coercive control and what constitutes this kind of abuse, but before now, many victims of coercive control were dismissed because the abuse that they were facing didn't leave any kind of visible injuries. In Tina's case, there was physical abuse, but coercive control doesn't always include violence or physical anything. Sometimes victims don't even realize that what they're going through is abuse. And another element of it is that often the victims are told by their abuser that it's their fault. You made me angry, so you deserve this. You did this, you did that. So many victims start to genuinely believe that they are what is causing their own abuse. It's so isolating, and it really does mess with your head to an insane degree. The hell that victims of coercive control are being put through is invisible to almost everyone around them, because this kind of abuse is quiet. It's often behind closed doors and in private conversations. And that's why organisations like today's charity are so crucial. The National Centre for Domestic Violence is a UK charity that does incredible work for victims, whether that's immediate relief from an abusive situation, finding accommodation and therapy, making sure that people are physically safe from their abuser by doing things like securing injunctions within like 24 hours. The legal element of trying to leave an abusive partner is probably the last thing that a lot of people think of, but I can imagine it's so incredibly daunting for victims. Without organisations like this one, it can be a long and expensive and drawn out process, and the idea of having to go through all of that can sometimes keep victims in abusive and dangerous situations for longer. The National Centre for Domestic Violence can help and advise victims through self-referral, or if someone you know is in an abusive relationship and needs help, you can submit a referral form for them, like on their behalf. You can reach them by phone, text, or email. Of course, we've linked their website down below in the description of this episode. And don't forget, our link tree is also always there with a bunch of resources, helplines, charities, anything you might need. I promise, help is available if you reach out for it. You deserve to live a full and happy life without fear, and it is possible. Now, back to the case. Shane Jenkins was very much known to police at this point in time when he was actively abusing Tina Nash. He was such a violent, aggressive man, and it would be taken out on practically everyone, whether that was a fight in a bar when he's gotten really drunk, or fighting the police officers that try to arrest him for fighting in the bar. He was an absolute menace to society, and he was a big fucking fella as well. Like, he was very, very strong, very intimidating. He was like 6'4", a rugby player, a weightlifter. In fact, he was a roid head as well. Taking steroids famously increases aggression. It's called roid rage because it ramps up testosterone levels and it fucks with the area of the brain that's important for emotional regulation. So Shane was so quick to fly off the handle and turn to violence. But don't get me wrong, his violence and aggression were always there, even when he was like completely sober and in his right mind, I guess, even though he was never truly in his right mind. But that's exactly my point, is that it wasn't just concentrated in these like triggered outbursts that he was having. There were very calculated elements to it as well. Like, he would purchase and store weapons like crossbows, fucking lethal weapons. Even when he's not actively angry about something, he's thinking about being violent and preparing to be violent again in the future. But no matter how many run-ins Shane Jenkins had with the police, none of it ever deterred his horrific behaviour. This man truly was a danger to society, and an even bigger danger to the woman that he claimed to love. Tina tried to break up with him so many times, but he would either get physically violent with her or manipulative and guilt-tripping in an attempt to keep her. It takes a victim, on average, about 7 attempts to leave an abusive relationship. 7. Shane was just so fucking scary. It was hard to predict when he was going to blow up. For example, one time Tina went out drinking and probably had a little bit too much. We've all been there. And when she got home, she threw up. Happens to the best of us, queen. But for whatever odd reason, this enraged Shane, like it has anything to do with him. He flew into another fit of violence, and I need to give you a warning for this one, guys. What he did to her was truly awful. He grabbed Tina, punched her in the face, and pushed his fingers into her eyes. Then he was just throwing her about, throwing her against walls, battering her about, out of their bedroom, out into the hallway, and then He threw her into the children's bedroom. Her 2 young sons were asleep in bed, and Shane Jenkins, this twisted fucking evil man, felt that it wasn't enough to just abuse Tina. He would now psychologically abuse all 3 of them, the kids too, by making them watch what he was doing to their mother, making everyone fear for their safety. At one point during this attack, Shane needed to use the bathroom, and Tina saw this as her chance to escape and call for help. But as soon as she dared to creep out into the hallway, there he was again. He grabbed her and threw her down the stairs. She literally could have broken her neck or hit her head and died. And genuinely, she thought she had died. She was laying in a heap on the floor in complete agony. She thought that her bones were broken, but she knew that she had to try her absolute best to make that escape. So she pulled herself up and she fled the house. She ran, or as close to running as she could, to her neighbour's house and desperately banged on their door. It was about 2 a.m. at this point. The neighbours were asleep, and frankly, this knocking on the door scared them. It woke them up, it scared them. Who could be at their house in the middle of the night, clearly wanting to get inside? So this neighbour peered out through the window, and when they saw Tina on their doorstep, sobbing, covered in bruises, marks, wounds, blood, she was just horrified. Immediately, she brought Tina in for safety and locked all the doors behind them while they called the police. During this time, Shane was still angry, obviously, and he began removing all of his stuff from the house and putting it out into the street, very dramatically, like moving himself out in the middle of the night. And I just can't stomach thinking about those 2 young boys that are caught up in all of this. They have just witnessed their mother being thrown down the stairs and having to run off for help. There they are, left alone in this house with this maniac, worried sick about their mother and for their own safety. As far as we can tell, he never did actually lay a hand on those boys, but they never knew if he might one day, they never knew when or if they would get caught up in his anger as well. When police arrived and spoke with Tina, she told them the situation, that Shane had abused her and caused all of the injuries that they were seeing littering her body. But she instantly felt guilty for telling on him. This is a tragic example of what coercive control does to a victim. He could have killed her, yet she was the one feeling sorry for him and wanting to protect him. After all, he would always tell her that it was always her fault. It was always her making him angry, her making him act this way. Not only that, but he would also tell her, as he was abusing her, that he loves her. He loves her so much, and that's why he does this. He was such a manipulative man, and it really did a number on Tina. She was taken to the hospital for her injuries to be seen to, and when her mum and sister walked into the room and saw her, they just burst into tears. Seeing their loved one beaten up and bruised once again, she had 2 black eyes. She was constantly throwing up. Parts of her were dislocated and fractured. It was truly devastating. She was in the hospital for nearly 2 whole days, and when she was discharged, she went to go and stay with her grandmother for a while, and that's also where her kids had been since the attack. The police had ordered Shane Jenkins to stay away from Tina, but of course he didn't. He was bombarding her with texts as soon as she was out of the hospital, talking about how much he loved her and how much he needed her and he couldn't possibly live without her. But Tina was doing her best to half ignore him. That was until just a few weeks into this separation, Tina's sister heard through the grapevine that Shane was already seeing a new woman. And even though Tina was severely abused and traumatized by this man, it still broke her heart to hear this. She felt like she loved him. And she was really confused as well because he's texting her every day talking about how much he loves her and how much he wants her back. He is just a classic lying manipulator. Around the 5-week mark, Tina got a call from a blocked number. And when she picked it up, you guessed it, it was Shane on the other end, begging for her back. And a day or 2 later, he would show up to where Tina was staying at her grandma's. He had no plans to stay away from her, ever. He was always going to manipulate his way back into her life, and no one could stop him. And I feared that one of his biggest motivations for doing so was so that he could sweet-talk her and manipulate Tina into retracting her police statements about the attack. She ended up writing them a letter saying that she had lied about Shane Jenkins attacking her. She said that what had really happened was that she had simply slipped down the stairs when she was carrying a bunch of stuff and she just fell and got all those injuries of her own accidental accord. The police didn't believe her, honestly. They said that they were already so in deep to this investigation that they were going to press charges against him regardless. And they did exactly that. When this case went to court, Tina had to get up in the stand and talk about what happened. And she lied under oath. She said the same thing there in court about slipping and falling down the stairs, that Shane had nothing to do with it. But, of course, that wasn't true. She had just committed the crime of perjury because her abusive boyfriend had manipulated her into doing so. In fact, he'd even coached her on how to act when she took the stand. He told her not to make eye contact with the judge and to just look like she doesn't care about it all. To be, oh my god, he even told her to be like obnoxiously chewing gum to make her look like she was so disinterested and maybe a bit common and like, you know, just to make people like her less. And despite everyone there in the room being able to see right through what was being presented, the fact that Tina herself was stood there lying and saying that he had nothing to do with her injuries meant that the case against Shane Jenkins collapsed and he was found not guilty of the assault. Afterwards, the judge approached Tina and told her that he could see what was going on and he really hoped that she would get out of the relationship soon. He could see what was in store if this didn't end. Everyone could. Shane would only get worse. But what could be done? He was found not guilty. And now the two of them were back together and they fell into that same pattern. Shane would physically and mentally abuse Tina and then he would say sorry and she would forgive him and repeat and repeat and repeat. The police would be called round to save Tina from Shane 9 times over a 2-year period. And as a result of many of these, Tina would end up hospitalised. Every time that the police were involved, social services were also brought in because remember, she had 2 young children living with them as all of this abuse is going on in the next room. And I'm not entirely sure what measures were actually being taken to protect the boys, but despite the awful, awful treatment that she was receiving, Tina never reached out for support from domestic violence organisations because she said that she never actually felt like she was the victim of the situation. In fact, Shane had manipulated her into thinking that it was her fault because she made him angry and that he was the victim of his emotions. The way that coercive control really brainwashes the victim into staying inside their abusive prison is so, so sad. But what pissed me off, honestly, is that Tina and her sons were never offered refuge when social services and police had been involved. Literally every professional that was called in to look at the situation could tell clear as day what was going on here, but barely any steps were actually taken to put a block in between Shane and Tina. Bear in mind, she had been hospitalised and the police had been round to rescue her 9 times. When is something gonna be done? Throughout their relationship, Shane would always be doing short stints in prison for violence towards Tina and towards others, the people that he drunkenly fought or glassed on nights out. But then he would be released from prison and sent right back to the same situation, right back to Tina, right back to the woman that he is abusing. He was, however, banned from, honestly, the majority of pubs and clubs in their city under a 5-year antisocial behaviour order because he was that much of a menace to society. And alongside all of this physical violence and aggression, Shane was also psychologically torturing Tina with infidelity. He was always sleeping with other women and making very little effort to hide it from her. In fact, he wanted her to know because he got off on her being hurt, whether that was physically or emotionally. Compulsive cheating is very much intertwined with a lot of domestic abuse cases. It's all about like tormenting the partner. It's making their life miserable, wearing down their self-esteem, and it makes the victim cling to the abuser all the more. But eventually, after suffering almost 2 years of this abuse, something changed for Tina. She wanted out of their relationship and she genuinely started trying to break away from Shane. She was telling all of her friends and family that she was finally ready to leave him. She just needed a little more time to get herself into a position where that could be possible. And maybe Shane could tell that Tina was slipping through his fingers because before she could leave, he would inflict one final attack that would change all of their lives forever. On the night of April 20th, 2011, the two of them had been round at a neighbour's house having a few beers, and the night ended, at least for Tina, in an argument, as it often did. She left Shane over at the neighbour's house drinking while she went to bed alone. But she was soon awoken during the night to him bundling her up tightly inside the sheets, so tight in fact that she couldn't move. She couldn't move her arms or legs or defend herself. Shane was about to commit his worst assault on her yet. He started by strangling her several times. She was in and out of consciousness, and that was exactly what he wanted, to bring her right to the brink of death and then save her so that he could do it all over again, like an animal toying with its prey. He was punching her over and over again, square in the face. Tina kept passing out and then coming back around and then passing back out again, and she recalled thinking that she was dead. She was completely disorientated. She couldn't speak, she couldn't move, and when she came back to consciousness the next time, her room was silent, but she could still feel Shane's presence. He was still in the room with her. And knowing that her kids were in the house, Tina's survival instinct kicked in. She wiggled free from the grip of the duvet that was wrapped around her so tightly, and she did something that quite possibly saved her life that night. She told Shane Jenkins that she loved him. A tactic that had worked a few times before. He would start to ease up on her a little bit if she pandered to him. And it was at this point that Tina became aware of the fact that she couldn't see. Like, not because it was dark or because her eyes were closed. Her eyes simply weren't seeing anything other than, like, glimpses of light. And then Tina reached up to her cheek and felt her eyeball resting on it. This monster had literally gouged her eyeballs out with his fingers. He had stuck his thumbs in the sockets of her eyes and pulled them out to the point where they were now hanging on by threads. And Tina wasn't the only one panicking about this. Shane went into a frenzy as well, repeating, oh my God, your eyes are hanging out of your head. Oh my God, look at your face. I'm going to get 20 years for this. It's all your fault." And then he said, quite frankly, the most disgusting, evil, sinister shit I have ever heard. He said to Tina, "You're blind, and you're not going to see your kids grow up. It's all your fault." He then picked her up and took her into the bathroom where he filled the bathtub and just plonked her down in it. And she was sure that he was about to drown her and finish the job that he has started. And it was at this point, when the cold water touched her skin, that Tina realised that she was fully naked. Well, aside from her bra that had been pulled down around her waist for some reason. She had been dressed when she went to sleep, so Shane must have undressed her, but she had absolutely no memory of it, and no memory of what he might have done to her after he undressed her. But she could hardly even think about that element of everything right now because she thinks that she's about to be drowned. Her eyeballs are hanging out of her head, and she's worried sick for her kids through all of this. If he was gonna kill her, they were in danger too. She had no idea how far he might go to cover up evidence or to get rid of potential witnesses. She actually worried that he might set the whole house on fire when he was done with her, and her kids would be caught in it. While Tina was there in the bath, she threw up, and Shane once again got really pissed off about this, and he left the room for a bit. And Tina spotted her opportunity. She dragged herself out of the bath, unable to see a thing. She sat herself down on the top step and shuffled on her bum down as quietly as she possibly could, despite all the agony that she was in. When she got to the bottom of the stairs, she bumped into Shane, and she begged him to call her an ambulance, but he refused. Mainly because he was scared of the consequences that would come to him when Tina's injuries were realised. But Tina knew that she had to keep trying to sweet talk him, doing her own form of manipulation now for survival. And she told him that she would lie for him. She would say that someone else did it or that it happened some other way. She would insist to the police that Shane was innocent and he never laid a hand on her. But he refused to call an ambulance, and eventually, after this back and forth, he just fell asleep on the sofa. How you can sleep soundly after what he had just done is so fucking grim, and it speaks to his mental state so loudly. The whole attack had lasted through the night and into the morning, spanning over 12 hours. Yet Tina still managed to find the strength to fight for her life. When Shane eventually woke up from this nap, the seriousness of the situation seemed to have dawned on him, and Tina was able to convince him to get some help. Well, to let someone else get help, because he was never just going to call for an ambulance. She begged him to let her son go round to her grandma's house to borrow her mobile phone, and when it was brought back to her, she decided to call her son's father to come over and take her to the hospital. Maybe Shane thought that he might be able to argue that this other man did it if he ever needed to defend himself. Or maybe he just genuinely thought that he could lie his way out of all of this. When her ex arrived at the house to come and save her, Tina was laid on the bed upstairs and she overheard Shane open the door to him and start spinning lies immediately. He said that a group of girls had attacked Tina behind a local shop and now she was injured. This whole time, no one had mentioned anything to Tina's ex, who was here to save her, about her eyes. We can only imagine the horror when this man walked in and saw the state that Tina was in. She was completely naked, beaten, eyes hanging from her fucking skull, man. He thought that she was dead. Shane, by the way, at this point in time, had hightailed it out of there. He had fled the house while this other guy was checking on the kids and checking on Tina. Shane knew that he didn't want to stick around for the aftermath of what he had just done, especially because chances are police were going to be called out. Tina's ex went round to the neighbour's house and asked for help, and one of them came round, one of them who had seen Tina fleeing from her abusive ex time and time again. She had seen these attacks play out. She helped Tina get dressed and be ready to be taken to the hospital. This whole time, no one knew what was going to happen to Tina. I mean, one thing was quite clear, and that was that she would probably never see again. But the idea that she might not even survive these injuries, her body might actually give up on her if they don't get her some help fast. She was just 29 years old, a mother of two, who were in the house at that point in time, and somehow she lived through this brutal attempt on her life, and she took control of the situation. Even though she was in agony, she saved her own life that day, and she protected her kids through a 12-hour-long torture session. Tina Nash is such a fucking warrior, man. Like, I really wish she didn't have to be there. When they got her to the hospital, Tina was rushed in for emergency surgery to try to save her eyes, but the thing is, she couldn't be put to sleep for it. She had to be awake for the whole thing. Could you fucking imagine? As if she hadn't been through enough traumatizing agony tonight. They couldn't let her fall asleep or be put to sleep with anesthetic because they didn't know yet if she was brain damaged. And if they let her go unconscious, she might never actually wake up. Later on, when it was eventually confirmed that she didn't have brain damage, she went through an 8-hour-long surgery on her eyes, but doctors were unable to save her sight. Tina has been blind ever since, and it was also discovered that her nose and her jaw had been broken in the attack. She was so devastated now, laying there in hospital, just so worn down by everything that she genuinely just didn't see how she could live on after this. She actually begged the doctors to just finish her off, to put her out of her misery. She didn't want to live anymore. In fact, she was convinced that social services were going to take her kids away from her. Not only was she trying to process the fact that she would never see their faces again, but she genuinely thought that they might now deem her to be an unfit mother and take them completely. But every professional that spoke with her tried to make her realize that she was the victim of all of this. Her kids wouldn't be taken away. She had done nothing wrong. Shane was just an evil, abusive man who would now be going to prison. It was of immediate importance for police to track down and apprehend Shane Jenkins, who was currently on the run and a potential danger to others. They looked everywhere for him, every location that he was known to go, but they couldn't find him anywhere. No one could get hold of him for 4 days. 4 days he was on the run, and no one really knows where he was or what he was doing in that time. But the whole time that he was at large, Tina was terrified that he would be coming to the hospital to finish her off. She would be hiding there under the hospital blankets, just trembling at the thought of him breaking in there, storming up to her ward and killing her. But thankfully, police would soon give her the one thing that could calm her down: the news that Shane had been caught and was being held in custody, charged with attempted murder. It was discovered in the subsequent investigation that Shane had actually watched a movie the night before the attack that had a scene where someone had their eyes gouged out. He had been inspired, it seems. And he actually sat there and tried to tell the police in his questioning that he was the victim in all of this. That Tina, little petite Tina, had attacked him. Big roid head, 6'4" bodybuilder, rugby fucking player, by the way. It was just insane. Police weren't buying it for a second. He didn't have any injuries. Tina had countless bruises, cuts, broken bones, fucking eyes hanging out of her head. Don't fucking sit there and try to make yourself the victim of this. I'm getting heated, of course. Shane pled not guilty at first, claiming diminished responsibility due to a mental health condition. I mean, it was very unlikely to work anyway, but medical experts were brought in to assess him multiple times, and it was concluded that no, he was definitely in sound mind when he did this. He's just fucking evil. I need to stop swearing as well. I'm sorry if that offends you, and I'm sorry if my mum's watching this. But one element of this case that's going to really piss you all off, as it did me, is the fact that Tina Nash, the victim of such a horrific, traumatic situation, then had to be put on a waiting list for therapy. She wouldn't be getting immediate mental health support. But you know who would? Shane. Shane got given a therapist while he was being held on remand, but Tina wasn't offered anything. Eventually, when his trial began in April 2012, a year after the attack, Shane Jenkins had decided to take a plea deal. He agreed to plead guilty to grievous bodily harm, not attempted murder, despite that being quite clearly what this is. He had strangled her multiple times over a 12-hour period, gouged her eyes out with his fingers, and left her for dead while he had a fucking nap. It was obviously attempted murder. The fact that he wouldn't get her help says everything. He wanted her dead. Tina very bravely sat in the public gallery for the whole trial, but Shane actually refused to attend court. How the fuck that is allowed, I don't know. It really pisses me off that criminals sometimes just have this option to just not face up to the consequences of their actions. The victims and their families, they hide away on a video link. But I mean, in some cases, if the judge feels like the defendant could have a violent reaction in court, then they won't be forced to attend. And obviously, Shane Jenkins was the type to cause such concerns. By the end of the trial, Shane was sentenced to life in prison for what he had done to Tina Nash. But the kicker is, he only had a 6-year minimum sentence. So realistically, the shortest amount of time that he could have served for almost killing and permanently disabling this woman was 6 years. Shane would be kept in a secure unit given his violent history. He was deemed a risk to himself and to other inmates, so he didn't have much social time at all. He was always locked, like securely locked in whatever room he was in. It's crazy because obviously all these really high security measures were being put in place for good reason, but the fact remained that he could still be eligible for release back into society after just 6 years. He would have been in his 30s, able to have another shot at life and probably abuse or maybe even kill someone else. Tina really struggled adjusting to her new normal, to being completely blind and needing carers for the foreseeable future, if not forever. She had no confidence left, no hope for the future. She lost a bunch of weight because she just had no appetite. She was, of course, dealing with so much unprocessed trauma as well, since it was so damn hard for her to see a professional. She was clearly suffering badly with PTSD. She would get panic attacks, nightmares, flashbacks. She was on all kinds of meds just to try and stabilize herself after what this man had done to her. Though, as time passed, Tina found real strength in this new normal. She used what had happened to her to raise awareness for domestic abuse situations like her own. She was doing TV and press interviews. She wrote a book called Out of the Darkness. She has been so vocal about everything and also about how disappointed she is with how the police handled this case. She said that she had actually reached out to the police in her area way back when she first started dating Shane, wanting to know about his criminal history, if this man was a danger to her. But police couldn't give over any information, so they didn't. So Tina never knew truly what kind of man this was. She knew that he had been violent to men in the past and these bar fights and what have you, but she had no idea that his previous romantic partners had also reported him for domestic abuse. Maybe if Tina had known the true extent of this man's violent patterns, then she would have run away. She would have run for the fucking hills. She might have saved herself the trauma and the pain by getting out early. But she wasn't afforded that opportunity. In 2014, 3 years after the attack that left Tina blinded, Clare's Law was officially introduced in the UK. It's known as the Domestic Violence Disclosure Scheme as well. It's a police policy basically giving people the right to know if their current or ex-partner has any previous history of violence or abuse, like intimate partner violence. The scheme is named after Claire Wood, who was murdered by her abusive ex-boyfriend in 2009. She was strangled and set on fire by her ex-partner George Appleton, and her family said that had she known about his violent history beforehand, her murder might have been prevented. So they fought for a law in her name which gives people a right to ask about their partner's criminal history. It also allows people who are concerned for a loved one to inquire on their behalf as well. If this had been available to Tina just a few years before, this might have been the catalyst that she needed to leave Shane early. But even after he was locked up and she was moving on and finding her strength again, poor Tina Nash still couldn't catch a break from horrible, abusive men. Tragically, the very next man that she ended up with a year later would be violent towards her all over again. All that courage that she had mustered up to leave, just to end up in another situation exactly like it, I can't even imagine how hopeless that would feel for her. Her new man was called Roland, and he knew the trauma that Tina had been through. She is a blind woman who relies on help from those around her, and he still betrayed her. He was eventually taken to court and pled guilty to assaulting Tina. For that, he was given 14 weeks in prison and a restraining order, stopping him from contacting her. The worst part is, Roland was known to the police, just like Shane Jenkins was. And again, had Clare's Law been a thing at the time, Tina might have had those red flags right from the start and been able to avoid him. But as for Shane Jenkins, he has served at this point about 12 or 13 years of his sentence, but as of last year, 2024, he has been moved to an open prison, meaning they're preparing him for release and to be integrated back into society. Fucking scary, man. Tina has spoken out about how petrified she is for him to be back out on the streets. She's worried not only for her own safety, but for the safety of her children, for the safety of any woman that might cross his path. Tina has since teamed up with Laura Richards, a criminal behavioural analyst known for her work in domestic violence cases. And with Laura's help, Tina is calling for the government to monitor abuse offenders the way that they monitor sex offenders, keeping a closer eye on them. To protect people from being subjected to violent attacks, we need to make sure that the authorities are managing and rehabilitating these people properly. We've left a link to a petition in the description of this episode. Please do check it out for more information. And today, Tina Nash is 44 years old, and she continues to live her life to the fullest that she possibly can. She loves being a mother to her two sons. One is now in his 20s and the other is a teenager. And she very bravely talks about her experiences a lot to raise awareness in the hopes that she could save others from enduring those same painful, abusive cycles that she did. Tina wants her story to be a lesson to anyone who is experiencing abuse, and charities like the National Centre for Domestic Violence are ready and waiting to help victims. Remember, you can find their website in the description of this episode, and of course, our link tree is available for you. You are never alone, and help is out there. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Outlaw Podcast. And thank you again to Casetify for collabing with us on this episode and making it possible. To shop the best deals this holiday season from Casetify, you can scan the QR code on screen right now or use my promo link. It's down below in the description, casetify.com/Eleanor, to customize your phone cases for 15% off. And if you spend $90 or more, you can get an even bigger discount. Just make sure to order by the cutoff date, which is soon, December 9th. If you're watching on YouTube, please don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, leave us a comment so that we can continue the conversation. If you're listening on a podcast platform, please rate us 5 stars, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!